they had...
And then Gabriel was born 2 years later.
In the same house?
Yes, I think so.
You were born where?
November the 4th, 1911. He was born in 1913 on the 7th of November. I was 2 years and 3 days older than him. And then Charles came next, I think. I think there were other little children. Who's that? Katie? I think there were other little children that were born, but they were either born dead or they died. Or they died before they were even a week old. Some of them died. Some of them died a day old or 2 days old. The one that lived the longest was a week old when she died.
Do you know what they died of?
I don't know. They died right after they were born. So I don't know what happened to them. I guess they were sick when they were born. I don't know.
And this was in between you.
Well, see, there was some between me and not between me and Gabriel. After Gabriel, between me and Gabriel, there's nobody. Then between there all the way through until after Louise. After Louise, there was a little boy that was born dead. I saw that one. He was born in Tiffany, and he was dead when he was born. So they buried him. The day he was born, he was buried because he was dead.
Do you know if they named him?
All of those that were died had a form of John, because John the Baptist, was a baptizer. So all those little children who were dead or died soon we were all baptized, and they were all given the name, some form of John, the girls and the boys both. So when we get to heaven, we have all those four little Johns up there waiting for us. 4 little Johns. Well, now we have more than that. Now we have Mark, and we have Charles, and we have Gabriel. That's it. 3 boys.
So you and Gabriel and Charles were born in that house, or were there more?
I'm not sure.
Do you recall how long you guys lived up in that area?
Well, Charles was not born there. He was born in Alamosa. I don't know why he was born in Alamosa. I think the grandmother was visiting her mother, and Dad was there too. They must have been coming to spend some time with Grandma in Alamosa, and Charles was born there, and he was baptized there too. Well, then who comes after Charles? Frank. Frank was born in that same house, but he was born there. But we had already been living in Carrizo, so he could have been born in Carrizo, but he wasn't, because it was time for me to go to school. So we were moving in, getting closer to getting me to school, and he was born in Grandpa's old house. And then when they took him to baptize him, they took him to Parkview. This is where I was baptized too, in Parkview, New Mexico. They took him on. I don't remember who his godparents were, but anyway, they took him to baptize him there. And then when they were coming back, Charles went to meet him, and he asked him what they named the baby, and it was Francisco de Sales. So he came running in the house, and he said, "I know what they named the baby. They named him Francisco Salao." We laughed so hard. Francisco for a little baby, Francisco is like that, a little baby. Francisco Salao. Anyway, Charles was just, I think he's 3 years old. He was 3 years older than Frank. See, they named him that because my grandfather, Gomez, was Frank. Named him after Grandpa. And Gabriel was named after our great-grandpa. He was my grandfather, my dad's father's father. So he was my grandpa's father, was named Gabriel. So they named Gabriel for him.
And you? Who were you named for?
I wasn't named for anybody. My father wanted me to be named Isabel. So that's the name I was taken. But when my uncle and my aunt were on the way to church, to have me baptized, they decided that I should have more than one name, see. They didn't think one name was enough for me, so they picked a name for me. And they picked the name of the housekeeper, and the priest's housekeeper was named Leontina, so they named me that. So, and that's the name I kept. That's the name they used. I was never called Isabel. I was always called Leontina.
How do you say that?
Leontina. Leontina. And teachers in school had a hard time with that name. They called him Lena, Tina, and all kinds of words, but they never called him rewrite. They had a hard time with that name.
And you kept that until you were Sister Rose?
Yes.
Took your vows? Tell me about your mom.
My mom? My mother was she was a very efficient person. She was almost an artist because when we needed clothes, she could make it. And all we had to do is show her in the catalog what we wanted to wear, and she'd make it. She didn't have to have a pattern. She just looked at the catalog and she made the dresses we liked. And we were talking with Frank one time, and he said, yes, but Mother was an artist. She was. She did all those things.
What do you know about her growing up? Where did she grow up?
She grew up in Alamosa.
Went to school till she was 16 and got married.
Yes, I don't know if she went to school till she was 16. I have no idea how far she got. But she got married when she was 16. And I'm sure that she didn't go to school after that. Because she wasn't in Alamosa anymore. She was in Lapwent, in the farm.
Okay, she was an artist. What else about her?
Oh, she was efficient. Very, very good housekeeper. And she was an ideal mother. She really was. She trained us right. She really did. She did most of the bringing up of us. Dad, of course, was busy working. But Dad helped too, but she was the main one that raised us.
Was she stern?
Yeah, she was a little stern. Well, we knew then when she said something, we better do it, or else.
Or else?
We got punished.
What kind of punishment?
Some kind of punishment, or she'd tell Dad, and Dad would punish us. And that's what we hated the most, because Dad hardly ever punished us. But when Dad punished, it was pretty good. We knew that we were scared. If my mother was going to tell Dad, then we really shaped up.
What else did your mom like to do? She liked to sew?
Yeah, she sewed. She was a very good cook. She also canned food, to preserve it for the winter, fruit and vegetables. So that when she died, we had what do you call, how do you say soterrano in English? It's a hole in the ground anyway, and it's covered on top, and then shelves inside. And they had all this food there in jars. So that when she died, the women just all they had to do is go down there and get all the food they needed to feed everybody that came to the house for people to come to the house when somebody dies. They come for condolence, and there were so many of them. So they just took jars after jars of food out of there that my mother had preserved to feed the people that came.
Said she liked horseback riding. Do you remember any other hobbies or anything like that?
I don't remember. She crocheted, made lace, and she did horseback riding. Other than that, I don't remember what she did. She was always busy, so I don't think she had too much time for hobbies. Raising 8 children takes quite a bit of time and energy. And they were all boys until Luis came. They were all boys after me. I was first. And see, then I wasn't much help to her because I was with Grandma most. By the time I was ready to do any work, I was with Grandma. So I wasn't much help for her. And so she had to get her help from the boys. And I don't know how much help they were.
Who was the troublemaker of the family?
Charles. He was a troublemaker.
Do you remember anything he did?
Not especially. He was always doing silly things, getting into my mother's nerves and getting punished.
Who were you closest with when you were growing up?
My brothers, I think Mark and Gabriel. See, Gabriel and I actually were very close to each other because we were not very far apart. We're just 2 years apart. So we got to be pretty good friends. And then when Mark came, he was quite a bit younger, but we took care of him. I spent a lot of time taking care of him when he was a baby. So I learned to appreciate him. And Frank too. I took much time taking care of Frank too when he was a little boy.
Tell me about Gabriel. I don't know anything about him. What did he like to do? What was he like?
He was a farmer. He was the farmer of the family. He went to the army, and when he came back, and he got married when he was in the army. His girlfriend went out to Washington or someplace when he was on furlough, and they got married out there. And she came back to Durango. That was her home. And then when he came back out of the army, they lived in Durango. And then I don't know what he was doing then. He wasn't farming because they lived in town. But then they moved to Tiffany and lived in the house in the farm that my father bought that had the irrigation, and he started farming. And he was very successful with his farm work because he was a very friendly person. He made a lot of friends, and he was very generous. So whenever anybody needed anything, if they'd ask Gabriel, he'd take care of it, See, the priest used to come and say Mass once a month in Tiffany. So when they changed priests, the one told the other one, if you ever need anything, all you have to do is tell Gabriel. He'll take you any place you want to go, and he'll do anything you want him to do for you. So the first thing the priest, when the new one came in, was hunt him up, because they knew that whatever they needed, they'd get from him. Or whoever, if they had to go any place where they did have no transportation, he'll provide it. So he was very generous.
Was he religious?
I think so. He wasn't over-religious. He was normally religious.
And Charles, tell me about him.
Well, what can I tell you about him except that he was naughty? And he left home kind of early and went to New Mexico. I don't know where he went to relatives or if he just kind of bummed around. But he got his education, and I don't know. I really don't remember what he did. I guess he didn't do anything too spectacular because I don't remember. Then he married and settled in Española, and lived there for a long, long time until they moved up to Seattle. And they took care of, when they moved up to Seattle, they took care of a man who was an invalid. They kept him in. Well, it was his house, but they moved in with him and took care of him until he died. And then he let them keep, he willed their house to them. Of course, he paid them when they took care of him, And Charles used to take him to the doctor and everything, And Isabel took care of him when he was in bed. He had a room downstairs. And sometimes he could get up and eat breakfast, and sometimes he couldn't. But on the days when he had to go to the doctor, they had to get him up, of course, couldn't. They had to get him up and dressed. And he always wore his hat. That was so funny, because there he was in a wheelchair with his hat on. He was going to the doctor. And the house have you been in that house? It's down, and then they have to go up the steps to get up on the road. So they had to carry him up in the wheelchair up those stairs. But there were enough big people that they could carry him up. And then they put him in the car. I don't know how. I guess they took him out of the wheelchair and put him on the car, but took the wheelchair along. They had to take him to the Veterans Hospital. And that was kind of far away, I think. Took him to the Vets Hospital because he was a veteran.
How about Uncle Mark? What do you remember about him? Your early memories?
When he was a baby, he was real cute. That I remember that. He was good looking after he was older too. But when he was a baby, he was just a cute little baby. And he wasn't a baby that caused a lot of trouble. He was kind of a quiet baby. And Frank always was. See, Frank was just a little older than Mark. He always wanted to give him rides, So he'd be in his little baby bug, and Frank was. One time I caught him taking him out of the house down the steps in the in his little buggy, And for good luck, by the time when he got to the door, I caught him. Otherwise, he could have gone down the steps with the buggy. You know what he could have done to him? Throw him out of the buggy and probably killed him. But then when he got outside, then on the flat, he could give him rides. And at first, he didn't like him. He was jealous of him because he was taking his place, you know. But after a while, he liked him, and he was always trying to give him rides in his buggy. He took him outside. Somebody had to help him out of the house because there were steps, at least 2 or 3 steps from the door to the ground. Somebody had to help him take him out, and then he gave him rides outside, up and down in front of the house. He took him, giving him rides in his buggy. And I think he enjoyed that. Then
How was Frank?
Frank, well, this was part of Frank taking care of. He used to take care of Mark. Then he grew up, and he went to school in Tiffany, but he had an awful lot of trouble in school in Tiffany. He was naughty, and the teachers got after him a lot, and they were always complaining about him. So Dad decided he's going to do something about that. So he took him out of school and sent him to Blanco. He stayed with my uncle, and he went to school with the sisters there, and he got along all right with them. And I don't know whether he graduated there or what he did, but I think he must have graduated there.
Do you remember if your father was hard on the boys, or were
Yes.
they his favorites, or how did that go?
My father was hard on the boys. He was hard on all of us. Dad was very strict. We were scared stiff of him. But he wasn't that bad, but we thought he was. He was. When he punished, boy, we were scared to death. But he didn't punish. That's why he didn't punish very often, you know. So when he got after us, then we really stepped the line. I think it was because he did it so seldom. We were scared. And Mother was after us all the time, you know, and we didn't care too much, you know, it didn't bother us because we were used to her being after us, but not Dad. Dad punished us very seldom.
All right. How about your sister, Louise? How
Well,
was she as a kid?
Louise, I didn't really know very much about when she was a little girl, except in like one time, he was very particular about her clothes even then, when she was a little girl. We were going someplace on a Sunday. I don't know if we were going visiting in the afternoon or we're just going to Mass in the morning, but I was dressing her. And she had some nice little clothes, you know, that Mother had made for her. And she had white stockings and white shoes. And I decided that she should get, that we were going to have her wear knee socks. And she started bawling. She wasn't going to wear knee socks. She wanted her stockings all the way up. And Mother called, "What are you doing to her?" I was gonna give her knee socks because I thought it was cute, you know. But Mother said, if she wants her long stockings, give her long stockings. So I did. So even then she was particular about her clothes. It's a little girl. And Mother used to make little suits for the boys, you know, when they were little, Mark and Frank. She used to make them little sailor suits with little short pants and big collars, you know. And we went to Ignacio to Mass, and those 2 little boys got out of the buggy, you know, in their little blue suits, and they looked so cute, you know, with those little big collars and short pants, and they were so cute, walking in front of us to go to church. Mother used to make their little pants from the back. You know, my father used to wear those bib overalls, but the back of the overall back of the legs didn't get torn. The front would get torn, but the back was right. So my mother took the back of that and she made little pants, little overalls for the little boys from that. They had little overalls from my father's old pants. She made them little overalls. And the first time Frank got a bought overalls the first day he went to school, he wore a bought overalls, and he was so proud of them. So and I was going to leave that day to go back to Alamosa to school, and I had to run after him. He was going to go to school all by himself because he was all dressed up in his dinner pail and his book bag and his new overalls. And he was going to go to school, and he wasn't going to wait for the big boys. He was going to go by himself. He just started out walking, and I had to run after him to say goodbye to him.
Did your mom read to you or anything like that? You guys?
Yeah, she did. She did everything for us. She taught me my catechism when I made my first communion. When it was time for me to make my first communion, my mother taught me my catechism. She took the catechism and she asked me the questions and told me the answers and made me memorize them. So by the end, when it was time for the priest to come and I was going to make my first communion, I knew the answers and the questions by heart. And then the priest asked me, how many gods are there? And guess what I told him? 3. I told him 3. Can't remember that so plain. I told him there were 3 gods. But somehow he let me make my first communion, even if I didn't know how many gods there were.
Was your mom a religious person?
Yes, she was. I remember seeing her praying her rosary. When things were hard, you know, how sometimes some things get hard at home. There'd be my mother sitting in the bedroom praying her rosary.
What were hard times?
Well, one year, we had all been in Alamosa during the winter because we older children had to go to school, and Mother stayed with us at Grandma's. Frank wasn't old enough to go to school yet. And then when we came home, Dad had to work. He had to stay back in, I can't remember, where some relatives of ours has lent him money to get us back. You know, you had to pay to go to the train, you know.
You're going to give Sister a sunstroke, guy. You haven't sitting out in the sun.
No, we've been moving away from the sun. This is my 3rd move, you know that?
Robert? You got to move over here. If you have out in the sun,
We probably should be going in to eat. Isn't it time to eat already?
Yes, it's time to eat.
Well, then we better go in and eat.
Come on, you shouldn't be sitting in the sun for that long. You've been there for a long time.
No, I was over there first, and I moved over, and this is the 3rd move out of the sun. Well, let's go. We can finish after dinner, then I'd have more. I have to take this off.
You were telling me about some hard times in the family.
What was I telling you?
We were talking about, I'm not certain where we were going with it, but I'd asked you, said, when hard times hit, they did so and so. And I said, well, what were those hard times? I don't know if it was on the farm or.
I can't remember what I was going to say. Hard times. I know one time we had hard times. We had been at Grandma's all winter, Mother and all us kids. And then when it was time for us to come home, Dad had to borrow money to get us because he had to pay for all of us on the train to get back. So then he stayed. Then what happened? I think he brought us to home, and came back and worked for the people who had loaned him the money to pay him back. And in the meantime, we ran out of flour at our house. I remember that. We didn't have any flour. We were little kids, but Mother called us all together and showed us that she didn't have any more flour, so we couldn't have any more bread. And she went to Grandpa's. We lived not too far away. And she went in the window and she got some flour from there once. But she didn't want to keep going over and getting flour from them because when they came back, they wouldn't have any. So she told us there wouldn't be any more flour. So we were really kind of worried, but we were worried because we didn't have any flour, because we were going to be hungry, you see. And then when Dad came, we saw him coming with a wagon or whatever he was coming. We ran out to meet him, And instead of asking him if he brought us some candy, we said, "Did you bring flour?" He was wondering why we were asking him to bring flour. So the first thing he came to Mother, he says, "Why do the kids ask me if we bring flour?" He says, "Because we don't have any." So the next day he went back and he brought flour. And I think he brought us some candy too. Otherwise, we always asked him if he brought us candy. That day we asked him if he had flour. Can't you get it?
Do you remember any other times like that when things got real tough?
No, I don't remember. I remember one time there was some tough times, but my mother was working out in the garden, and I was in the house. I don't know what I was doing. Not much, I'm sure. Then it was getting close to dinner time, so I set the table. I put the dishes on the table. And then I went on to call Mother and asked her to come for dinner. She came in and she looked, there wasn't any food, just dishes. She said, "What do you expect us to eat? Dishes?" See, that's all I could do. I always set the table. So she always had to provide the food. I always set the table. So I did my part, and then I went and called everybody for dinner, and there wasn't any food. Poor Mother. She had to get to work and make some dinner.
What's the best advice your mother ever gave you?
I don't remember that she ever gave me any particular advice. Just can't remember.
How about your father?
I really don't remember. I don't think they ever made it a point to tell us anything. I think they did, but we took it in stride and we never thought about it again, I bet. I don't remember any of it.
What are your fondest memory of your mom? What do you remember?
My mom, let me see. The last time I went there, I went by train. I always went by train, that little narrow gauge. And they got me an Allison. And the whole family went to get me. Mother and Dad and all the kids went to get me. And then when I don't know why we didn't go with the wagon or whatever they went with. Mother and I walked. We walked from where the flume is? They call it the flume, that ditch. We were walking. Mother and I and some of the little kids were walking too. And I remember Mother was a little bit upset with me because I didn't want to go alone they wanted me to come home, you know, and I didn't want to go alone. I wanted to take somebody with me because I was afraid that I wouldn't get back. I wanted to get back to school, see. So I insisted I didn't want to go alone. So I asked if Juanita could go with me. She was a little girl, you know. And they said yes, she could go with me. And Mother was a little bit upset about that because she says, now why wouldn't you want to come home alone? You're coming home. Why wouldn't you want to come home? I don't remember how I answered her, but the truth was because I thought if I take her, I'm sure to get back because she'll have to come back home, see. And I was afraid they might keep me, you know, and I couldn't start school in time. So she went with me. And then I was sure I could come back in time because I had her to take care of. And Mother she didn't really scold me. She just wanted to know why I didn't want to come home alone, why I wanted to bring somebody with me. And that was the truth. I don't know if I told her or not. I probably didn't.
Why would you think they'd want to keep you?
I don't know. You get silly notions, you know. When they asked me to come home, you know, I didn't know why they wanted me to come home.
And why did they?
Well, they were expecting that little baby that died. And they wanted me to be home so I could help Mother. Could be around when the baby was born. I was there anyway when the baby was born, but he was born dead anyway, so we didn't have to do anything except bury him. And I couldn't do anything about it. Dad did it.
How'd the family react to that?
Not very well, you know how people will react when something like that happens. Everybody was unhappy. You couldn't be happy about getting a baby, and everybody's so excited about getting a new baby, and then it comes out, it's dead. We didn't like it very well, of course. And since they already lost 3 others before that, it was tough for them. And when, they had a midwife. They had a midwife, not a doctor. They had a midwife come in, and she was in the house. And I was in the house, and Juanita, we were in the house, and Dad and the boys were out in the field working. So when Mother got sick and the baby was going to be born, I don't know how I think the lady told us that Mother was sick. So she took off to tell Dad that Mother was very sick, he should come home right away. He came, but she wasn't that sick, you know, wasn't that serious. But see, because we were kids, you know, knowing that Mother was sick, we wanted Dad home. So he came, poor man, he was all excited, you know, and it wasn't that serious at all. And
what was she sick with?
when the baby was born, you know, when babies are born, the mother gets sick.
How did your mother die?
Well, she had I think she had an aneurysm because it was toward evening, and she went out to the ditch to get water, and the kids were coming home from school, and Frank was the front one, I guess. He was coming home from school, and Mother was carrying 2 buckets of water, so he caught up with her and took them from her and carried them and walked home with her. And then when they got in the house, Mother asked him to help her to bed because she had a terrible headache. So he did. He put down the water and helped her to bed. And then he went to look for Dad because Mother was that time she was real sick. She had a terrific headache. And by the time Dad came, she was in a coma. And she didn't come out of that coma at all. She died the next day, and she never came out of the coma. And they took her to Durango, I think, to the hospital, but she never came to.
Who was your mom's favorite child?
Gabriel. We knew that. Gabriel was her light. Because Gabriel was so good, he was such a good guy, and he was so good to her. Naturally, she'd like him.
And do you remember your mom? Did she have any favorite music?
No, I don't think so, but she sang a lot. She used to sing hymns and Spanish songs a lot. Even the English ones she used to sing. I think she sang some of her school songs, that she knew from learning when she was a little girl. She used to sing a lot. Or hum, when she was working. She'd hum or she'd sing. If she knew the words, she'd say the words and sing.
How did your father's life change after she passed away?
Well, he was very, very, very lonesome. And he began to get careless with his person, When I went to see him the first time after my mother died, he hadn't even shaved. He had beard all over his face. And, you don't like to see that. He began to just not take care of himself. So I said, Daddy, why don't you shave? So he did. But he never did that before. He never let the beard grow like that before. He always shaved every morning or whatever times you do it. And then he looked clean. But then that day when he met me at the train, and he looked like a bear. He was all over his face. So I think the next day he shaved, and then he looked a little better.
How did they pick the spot where they buried your mother?
Well, there was actually no cemetery in Tiffany at the time. So what they did, they picked a place to have a cemetery, and my mother was the first person to be buried there. It was right at the edge of our property. I think it was nobody's property at the time, but it was right at the end of our property, and the people got together and they put a fence around it and got the cemetery ready. And Mother was the first one to be buried there. Now there are a lot of other people that are buried there, but my mother was the first one.
Did your father like music?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think he was very much attuned to, but he liked to dance, though. He used to tell us when he was a young man. One time they wanted to go to the dance, and it was raining and miserable, And Grandpa said, "No, you can't go to the dance tonight. It's too bad out. You stay home." So they agreed to stay home, and they went to bed. Grandpa and Grandma and everybody went to bed, and they went to bed, but instead of going to bed, they got themselves dressed to go to the dance. And Grandpa didn't quite trust them, so he went to check. But when they heard him coming, they got in bed, but they were all dressed up. But they were in bed when he came. But as soon as he went back to his room, they got out and they got in their horses and they went to the dance. And then the horses had trouble, I guess, and they fell. They slipped and they had to get up, and they got themselves all full of mud. So when they got to the dance, their pants were all muddy at the bottom and around, they were really messy. And then the next day they came home, and their clothes were all mud. So they paid my aunt, their sister, so to clean her clothes, and she wouldn't say anything. They paid her. So she wouldn't say, she'd clean their clothes. They paid him to clean her clothes and that she would keep her mouth shut. So they got by with it. But anyway, that's what they did. They went to the dance, and I don't know how they danced in their muddy clothes, but they must have.
What do you know about your grandfather? He said he was a farmer and a rancher.
Yes, first he used to have sheep. He must have had a lot of them. And then he sold the sheep and bought cattle. And then I don't know exactly what happened, but he lost the cattle. I don't know how he lost them. And then he used to be rich, you see, because he had all this property. And then he became poor.
Did his kids take care of him?
No, he took care of himself until he was real sick, and then he went to. She lived with us, and until he died, which was, I would say 2 months or something like that, during the summer.
And after he died, did your grandmother stay living with you guys?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't remember what she did, but she didn't stay with us. She might have gone to her own house. She had her own house, They had their own little farm, and she had her own house. So she may most likely went to her own house, or she might have gone with her daughter. I don't know what she did. I don't remember. But she didn't stay with us because that's the day when we moved from there and came to Tiffany. That's the year. And when we came to Tiffany, we didn't come to Tiffany first. We came to some place in New Mexico near Rosa, where they were working on the railroad, and some person that my father knew gave him a job on that railroad. They were adding railroad, or I don't know what they were doing, but anyways, the railroad. And we went there, and we lived in a 2-room house. It was just the whole house was 2 rooms, and we lived in there and we went to school. I think we walked, because I don't know how Dad went to work before we went to school. So I think we walked to school, and it was quite a ways. We walked to school, and we took our lunch and ate there, and then came home and walked home, of course, coming back, until the school changed its policy. They had everybody in all 8th grades in one room and one teacher, and they decided that the children had to pay $1.50 a week to go to school, and Mother and Dad said they could afford to send me to school, but they couldn't send all the boys to school. $1.50 a week, so because Dad was working, but he wasn't earning that much money. So I went to school a few weeks that my brothers didn't go. They stayed home, and I went to school. And then something else happened that was bad with the school, so they moved the school. Actually took the building and moved it farther away. And they had one teacher and one student. One teacher, one student. All the other kids, none of them went back. None of them were able to pay that much. But by that time, I wasn't going to school yet anymore. They had one, and we looked in, and there was one student and one teacher. I don't know how long they kept the school, but it was just a little school. That's the only time when I went to a school like that, like a 1-room school. That's the only time I did. Then we came to Tiffany. And we came with a wagon, you know, and we had all our belongings in that wagon, beds and everything. It was piled high, and way on top was Frank. And he had a little navy blue coat that had a real big collar. And my father used to say, wherever that collar moves, there goes Frank's head. If the collar went that way, so his head went. He was sitting up on top of the mattresses way up high. I guess the rest of us were up there most of the time, but he was the one that always was up there. He was little. And Mark wasn't born yet, I don't think. Oh yes, he was. But Mother carried him in her lap in front, and Frank was way up on top of the mattresses. I forgot to teach him about his Mackinaw with the big collar. Wherever the collar went, there was his head.
I tell you, that's something your mom made for him?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I think they bought that. But it had a huge collar, big collar. And I guess it was kind of heavy, so the collar moved on way there where his head. He didn't have enough energy to pull it away, so he went with it.
When's the last time you remember the whole family being all together?
Well, then, see, we moved, so we were all there. We moved from where we had been all winter, and we came with a wagon and a team and all our property, and we got into Tiffany, and there's a farm that's, well, Tiffany's a little town like here, and the farm was out like this, from and across the road, and we moved in there. It was not a very prosperous house. It was livable. And we moved in there, and we kids went to school. The school was in town, and we walked because it was just a little ways to go to school. And we went to school. I was in the 4th grade. I had been in the 4th grade for the last 5 years, I think. Every place we moved, I was in the 4th grade, and we moved again, and I was still in the 4th grade. I never got to be moved farther because we were always moving, so we didn't get. So I was in the 4th grade, and the others were all younger, so they were lower down. Gabriel and Charles and Frank wasn't in school yet, and of course Mark was a baby; he wasn't in school. And that's the time when my mother bought some material and made me. She bought it was a red material that was checked. Made me a dress. There was a little bit of material left over. She made Mark a dress from it, a little dress for him. Then the first time I wore my dress, Mark wore his too. So it was a Sunday morning, and I was holding Mark, and I had my new dress, and he had his new dress too. So Dad came in, and he said, "Well, you look just like your sister." He was dressed. We both had the same dress out of the same material. That's the way my mother was, you know. She always saved every scrap and made clothes for the little ones from the scraps that were left for the bigger ones, or from my father's old clothes. He would take the back of the legs, you know, they were not torn, and she'd make little coveralls for the little boys, little overalls for the little boys. And from the back of his shirts that weren't torn, she'd make little shirts for the little boys.
Did she get you to sew and things like that?
What?
Did you sew also with your mom? Did she teach you how?
Well, I learned something, but I didn't learn to use the machine very much. She used to use the machine a lot. I used to do handwork, you know, for her, like put on buttons and stuff like that. But the machine I never got to use. But she did. She used to make all these little clothes for the little kids. And patched. Dad's clothes were always patched. She was never running around torn. But we never had store clothes. All our clothes was